It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon drive through the countryside, the kind of road where the trees lean in like old friends, and the air smells faintly of rain. But then, I saw it. A weather-beaten barn, standing alone in a field that time had forgotten. Its roof sagged under decades of storms, its wooden walls scarred by the sun. And yet, there was something about it. Something that made me slow down, pull over, and just stare. The wind was still, but the barn door moved just slightly, as if inviting me in. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked closer, each step echoing in the silence. The smell hit me first, a mix of dust, oil, and something metallic. Something old. I reached for the door, my fingers brushing against splinters worn smooth by years of weather. It groaned open, and that's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape in the shadows, low, wide, and unmistakably powerful. My eyes adjusted, and the details emerged. The long hood, the aggressive stance, the chrome glinting beneath layers of dust. A 1969 Mustang fastback. Not just any Mustang. This one wore the scars of a life lived fast. Faded racing stripes ran down its spine like battle wounds. The tires, flat and cracked, still clung to the rims like they were waiting for one last run. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. The air inside the barn was thick, heavy with the weight of stories untold. On the dashboard, a faded photograph, a young man in a leather jacket leaning against this very car, grinning like he owned the world. Behind him, a drag strip. The year? 1971? The caption on the back? "One last race before I go." I ran my hand along the fender, feeling the roughness of rust and the cold bite of steel beneath. This wasn't just a car. This was a time capsule. A machine that had once roared down highways, turned heads at stoplights, and maybe, just maybe, broken a few hearts along the way. And now, it was sleeping, waiting, forgotten by everyone, except fate. The owner's story began to unfold in my mind. A young man with big dreams, a love for speed, and a car that was more than metal. It was his identity. Then, one day, he vanished. Some say he left for the military. Others whisper about a race gone wrong. No one knows for sure. But the car stayed, locked away, untouched for over 40 years. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cracked, the steering wheel worn smooth where his hands once gripped it. I could almost hear the echoes of the past, the roar of the engine, the cheer of the crowd, the pounding of his heart as he shifted into high gear. My fingers found the keys, still hanging from the ignition. I hesitated. After all these years, could it still breathe? I turned the key. The first sound was a cough, deep, mechanical, almost like it was clearing its throat after a long sleep. Then, silence. I tried again. This time a low rumble. The barn seemed to vibrate. Dust fell from the rafters. And then, it happened. The engine roared to life, raw and unfiltered, like a lion waking from hibernation. The sound wasn't just noise. It was history, defiance, and pure adrenaline rolled into one. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just a barn find. This was a resurrection, a second chance for a legend. And as the sunlight spilled across the hood, I realized something else. This story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because what I found inside that barn is only the beginning. And if you think you've seen everything, you're about to be proven wrong. It was the kind of road that felt like it had been forgotten by the world, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt winding through fields that stretched endlessly under a pale sky, the kind of place where the air carried the scent of rain and old wood, and where every turn seemed to hide a secret I had. Been driving for hours, chasing nothing in particular when I saw it. A shape on the horizon that did not belong a barn standing alone in the middle of an overgrown field, its roof sagging under the weight of decades. its walls leaning as if tired of holding their own memories together. There was something about it, something that made me slow down without thinking. My hands turned the wheel and the tires crunched over gravel as I pulled to the side of the road. The barn door was closed, but not tightly. A sliver of darkness peeked through the gap, and in that darkness I thought I saw movement. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks, but I felt it a pull, like the place was calling me. I stepped out of the car. The air was still heavy, with the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. Each step toward the barn felt louder than it should have. The crunch of gravel, the soft thud of my boots on the grass, the faint creak of the wooden boards shifting in the breeze. When I reached the door, I placed my hand against it. The wood was rough, splintered in places, but warm from the sun. I pushed gently, and it groaned open, the sound echoing into the darkness inside. The smell hit me. First, a mix of dust oil and something metallic, something old. My eyes adjusted slowly. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows, and then I saw it. At first, it was just a silhouette, low, wide, and unmistakably powerful, the kind of shape that makes your heart beat faster even before you know what it is. I stepped closer, the dust in the air catching the light. From the doorway and swirling around me like tiny ghosts, the details came into focus. A long hood, an aggressive stance, chrome edges dulled by time, and there on the front, a badge that made my breath catch, a 1969 Mustang fastback. The light from the doorway spilled across the hood, revealing the faded racing stripes that ran like scars from a life once lived at full speed. The dust danced in the air like it was alive, swirling around the curves of the car, as if reluctant to let go of its long-kept secret. I could feel the weight of the years pressing in. The silence was thick, but beneath it there was something else, a hum so faint I could almost believe it was my imagination. My hand hovered above the hood, not quite touching, as if afraid that contact might break the spell. The metal beneath the dust seemed to radiate a quiet defiance, as though it had been waiting for this moment for decades. I moved along the side, my boots stirring the dust on the floor, each step revealing more of the car. The cracked leather seats, the steering wheel worn smooth by hands that once gripped it with purpose, the faint outline of a number painted on the door now barely visible under the grime. And then I saw it, a small photograph tucked between the seat and the console. The edges curled and yellowed with age. I pulled it free and brushed away the dust. It showed a young man in a leather jacket leaning against this very car, his smile wide, his eyes bright, with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. Behind him, a drag strip stretching into the distance, the crowd blurred, but the energy almost tangible even through the faded print. I slipped the photograph into my pocket and slid into the driver's seat. The air inside was different, heavier, as though the car itself was holding its breath. The cracked leather creaked under my weight. My fingers traced the outline of the gear shift, the worn grooves in the steering wheel, the faint smell of gasoline, still lingering after all these years, and then I saw them, the keys still hanging from the ignition, their metal dulled but intact. My heart pounded in my chest as I wrapped my fingers around them. They were cold, almost unnaturally, so as if they had been waiting untouched in the dark for this exact moment. I turned the key slowly. The first sound was a cough, deep and mechanical, like a giant clearing its throat after a long sleep. Then silence. I tried again this time. The cough was followed by a low rumble. The barn seemed to vibrate, dust falling from the rafters, the sound growing louder, richer, until it became a roar, raw and unfiltered, like a wild animal waking from hibernation. The vibration traveled through the seat into my bones, and in that moment I knew this was no ordinary barn. This was a resurrection. The roar filled the barn like a living thing, wrapping itself around the wooden beams and rattling the loose boards. The dust swirled faster, as if the air itself was being pulled into the heartbeat of the machine. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the vibration travel up my arms into my chest, into the very center of me. And for a moment it was as if time folded in on itself. The decades between then and now, collapsing into a single breath. I could almost see him, the young man from the photograph, sliding into this same seat, his hands steady, his eyes locked on the horizon. The smell of burnt rubber and gasoline thick in the air as the crowd roared somewhere far away. The sound was intoxicating, raw, and unpolished, like it had been waiting all these years to remind the world what it was capable of. I eased my foot onto the pedal, and the engine responded instantly. The note climbing higher, sharper, the barn trembling around me, and yet beneath the power there was something else. A whisper, almost lost in the noise. A sense that this car carried more than just speed. It carried a story, one that had been buried under dust and silence for far too long. I let the engine idle and stepped out the air outside. Felt different, charged as if the ground itself had absorbed the energy of that moment. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the field. The barn door swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time I noticed something half hidden beneath a tarp in the far corner. I walked toward it, my boots stirring the dust, each step heavier than the last, as if the air was thickening around me. I reached down and pulled the tarp away, revealing a battered metal toolbox, its surface dented and scratched, the paint almost gone. Inside were tools worn smooth from years of use, and beneath them a stack of envelopes tied together with a strip of leather. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age. My fingers trembled as I untied the strip. The top envelope bore a name written in bold, confident letters, the same name etched into the small brass plate on the dashboard. I slid the letter out. The handwriting was hurried, the ink faded, but still legible. It spoke of races won and lost, of nights spent on the road chasing something just out of reach, of promises made and broken, and at the end, a single line that made my chest tighten: keep her safe until I come back. The words on that page seemed to hum in my hands, as if the ink itself carried the weight of a promise made long ago. I read them again and again, each time feeling the pull of something deeper, something that went beyond the car, beyond the man who once drove it. The handwriting was rushed but strong, the kind of script that belongs to someone who lives fast and feels everything in extremes. I could almost hear his voice in the lines, the way he might have spoken them over the roar of an engine, or in the quiet moments before a race. The leather strip that had bound the letters together was worn soft from years of being handled, and I wondered who had untied it last and why they had left it here untouched. I dug deeper into the box and found a small metal key. Not for the car, but for something else. It was old, heavy, with a square head and a faint engraving on one side, the letters barely visible under the tarnish. I slipped it into my pocket and kept searching beneath the tools and letters. There was a folded map, the paper brittle and stained with oil marks, the edges frayed from use. It showed a stretch of back roads winding through countryside and forests, with a single red X marked far from any town or landmark. The ink of the X was the same faded blue as the writing in the letters. The barn felt colder now, as if the air had shifted, the light from the doorway had dimmed the sun, slipping lower behind the trees. Shadows stretched across the floor like long fingers reaching for the car. I glanced back at the Mustang, its presence filling the space like a sleeping giant, the engine still ticking softly from the heat of its brief awakening. I knew then that this was not just about restoring a car. This was about following a trail left decades ago. A trail that someone had wanted to be found, but only by the right person. I stepped outside, the evening air, sharp against my skin, the field around the barn swaying gently in the breeze. The road ahead seemed different now. Not just a way home, but the first step in something bigger. I looked back once more at the barn, the open door, the glint of chrome in the shadows, and I felt it again, that pull, that whisper, that this was only the beginning, and whatever waited at the end of that map would change everything. The map lay unfolded on the passenger seat, its creases deep from years of being folded and refolded. The red X staring back at me like an unblinking eye. I started the Mustang again, the engine S growl now familiar, yet still carrying that raw edge that made my pulse quicken. The barn faded in the rearview mirror as the road stretched ahead, the countryside rolling past in shades of gold and green. The air through the open window carried the scent of grass and distant rain, and beneath it all the faint tang of gasoline from the engine. The road was narrow, twisting through fields and patches of forest. The kind of road where you could drive for miles without seeing another soul. And yet I could not shake the feeling that I was not alone. Every turn of the wheel brought me closer to the X on the map, but also deeper into a silence that felt heavier than before. The trees leaned in over the road, their branches knitting together to block out the sky. The light dimmed and the shadows grew longer. The Mustang S headlights cut through the gloom, casting fleeting shapes that seemed to move just beyond the edge of vision. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the map, tracing the route over and over, as if the paper itself might reveal more if I touched it enough. The first sign of life came in the form of an old gas station, its paint peeling, its sign faded to the point of being unreadable. A single pump stood under a rusted canopy, the glass on its meter clouded with age. I pulled in the gravel, crunching under the tires. The place looked abandoned, but as I stepped out, a figure emerged from the shadows of the building. An old man, his face lined like the bark of an ancient tree, his eyes sharp and watchful. He said nothing at first, just looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car again. The old man's gaze lingered on the Mustang as though he was looking at a ghost, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if measuring whether I was someone worth speaking to. The silence between us stretched until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then without a word, he turned and walked back toward the shadowed doorway of the station. I followed the boards of the porch, creaking under my weight. The smell of oil and old wood, thick in the air inside the dim light, revealed shelves lined with dusty bottles and faded tins, relics from another time. He moved slowly to a counter, and from beneath it pulled out a small wooden box, setting it down with a weight that made the surface tremble. He opened it, and inside lay a collection of old photographs and scraps of paper, each one worn and fragile. He picked up a photo and held it out to me. It was the same man from the picture I had found in the barn, only younger. His hair longer, his smile wider, the Mustang gleaming behind him in the sunlight. The old man's voice, when it came, was low and rough like gravel. He said he knew the man in the photo, that they had raced together once, on a stretch of road that no longer existed, swallowed by time and neglect. He said the man had been fast, not just in his car, but in his life, always chasing something, always running from something else. He told me the man had left one night without warning, taking the Mustang and a promise to return, but he never did. The only thing that came back was a letter and a map, the same map now lying on my passenger seat. The old man's eyes flicked toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in. Then he leaned closer and told me that the red X was not just a place. It was a marker for something hidden, something dangerous, something people had been looking for. Ever since the man disappeared, he said, if I was going to follow it, I needed to understand that the road would not be empty and that some things, once found, cannot be put back. I left the station with his words heavy in my mind. The sun had dipped lower, the sky streaked with deep orange and purple. The Mustang's engine rumbled to life, and I pulled back onto the road, the map spread out beside me, the red X pulling me forward. The trees closed in again, their shadows long and twisting, the air cooler now carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, faint but sharp. I drove on the road, narrowing the light, fading the sense of being watched, growing stronger with every mile, until finally the forest broke, and I saw it ahead, a bridge old and rusted stretching over a river that moved slow and dark beneath it. The bridge loomed ahead, its rusted frame silhouetted against the fading light, the river below moving slow and dark like it was hiding its own secrets. The boards under the tires groaned as I eased the Mustang forward, each creak echoing into the stillness. The air here was different, cooler, heavier, carrying the scent of water and something faintly metallic. I kept my eyes on the far side, where the road disappeared into a wall of trees. But halfway across, I saw it a shape leaning against the railing, a figure barely moving, watching me approach. As I drew closer, the figure straightened, stepping into the weak light, filtering through the clouds. It was a man, tall, broad, shouldered, his face shadowed by the brim of a weathered hat. His clothes were worn, but not in the way of someone who had been forgotten, more like someone who had been waiting. His gaze locked on the Mustang, and for a moment I thought I saw recognition there, not just for the car, but for me. He didn't move aside until I rolled to a stop a few feet away. Then he walked slowly to the driver's side, his boots thudding against the boards, each step deliberate. He leaned down, his eyes meeting mine, and in a voice low enough that it was almost lost to the sound of the river, he said, "You following the map, aren't you?" I didn't answer, but he smiled like he already knew. He told me the road ahead wasn't on any map anymore, that it had been erased after something happened, something no one wanted to talk about. He said the man who once drove this car had crossed this bridge too, and that when he did, he was not the same when he came back, if he came back at all. Before I could ask more, he stepped back, tapping the roof of the Mustang twice with his knuckles, a sound that seemed to echo longer than it should have. Then he turned and walked to the edge of the bridge, leaning on the railing again, as if our meeting had never happened. I pressed the accelerator, the Mustang rolling forward, the boards groaning under the weight, until the bridge was behind me and the road narrowed into a tunnel of trees, the light fading faster now, the air colder, the sense of being pulled towards something I couldn't yet see growing stronger with every turn. The tunnel of trees closed in around me, their branches arching overhead like the ribs of some ancient creature, the light filtering through in fractured beams that painted the road in shifting patterns. The Mustang's headlights cut a narrow path ahead, the engine's steady growl. The only sound in the heavy air, the deeper I went, the more the world outside seemed to fade, until it felt like I was driving through a place that existed apart from everything else. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, mingled with that faint metallic tang that had been following me since the bridge. The road began to curve tighter, the trees pressing closer, their trunks thick and gnarled, their roots breaking through the asphalt in places, forcing me to slow. The shadows seemed to move at the edges of my vision, shapes that vanished when I turned my head. The feeling of being watched was no longer just a whisper. It was a weight pressing between my shoulder blades. I gripped the wheel tighter, my eyes fixed on the narrow strip of road ahead, and then I saw it. A glint of light low to the ground. Off to the right, I eased the Mustang to a stop, the engine idling low, and stepped out. The air was cooler here. The silence so complete it felt like sound itself had been drained away. I moved toward the glint, my boots sinking slightly into the damp soil until I reached it. Half buried in the earth was a small metal emblem, its surface tarnished, but the shape unmistakable. It was the same badge that sat on the Mustang's grill, only older, worn smooth by time. I dug it free and turned it over in my hand. On the back, scratched into the metal, were 3 numbers and a single word, the same handwriting as the letters in the barn. A sudden rustle in the trees made me spin. The shadows shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing just beyond the reach of the headlights, tall, still watching, but when I stepped forward, it was gone, the forest swallowing it whole. I slipped the emblem into my pocket and returned to the car, the seat cold against my back as I started the engine again. The road ahead seemed darker now, the trees thicker, the pull of the red X on the map stronger than ever, and somewhere deep in the hum of the Mustang's engine, I thought I could hear it, a faint rhythm like a heartbeat. Not my own, guiding me forward into whatever waited beyond the next bend. The road narrowed further, the trees on either side growing taller and denser, their branches weaving together so tightly above that the last traces of daylight were swallowed whole. The Mustang IS headlights carved a narrow tunnel of pale light through the darkness. The hum of the engine steady beneath me, but my grip on the wheel tightening with every mile. The map lay folded on the seat beside me, but I no longer needed to look at it. The pull of the red X was something I could feel now, like a thread wound tight around my chest, drawing me forward. The air was colder here, sharper, carrying the scent of damp leaves and something faintly metallic that I had first noticed miles back. The asphalt gave way to gravel, the crunch under the tires, loud in the silence. The trees thinned just enough for me to see the outline of a structure ahead, a low building half hidden by vines and shadows, its roof sagging, its windows dark. I slowed the Mustang to a crawl, the beam of the headlight sweeping across the front of the building, revealing a faded sign. Its letters barely legible, but enough to make out the words "service" and repair the paint peeling the wood beneath, warped by years of rain and sun. I killed the engine. The sudden silence pressing in around me, I stepped out the gravel shifting under my boots. The air heavy and still. I moved toward the building. Each step slow, deliberate. The boards of the porch groaning under my weight. The door hung slightly open. Its hinges rusted. I pushed it gently and it swung inward with a long, low creak. The smell inside was thick with oil and dust. And something else. Something older. The beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing workbenches littered with tools, their metal surfaces dulled with age shelves lined with jars of bolts and screws, and in the far corner under a heavy tarp, the outline of another car smaller than the Mustang, its shape unfamiliar. I crossed the room, my boots echoing on the concrete floor, and pulled the tarp back. The dust billowed up around me, and when it cleared, I saw a car that looked like it had been frozen in time. Its paint faded, its tires flat, but its body intact, a license plate still fixed to the back, the same 3 numbers I had found scratched into the emblem in the forest. I moved closer to the second car, its faded paint catching the weak beam of my flashlight in dull patches. The license plate with those same 3 numbers seemed to pulse in my vision like it was trying to tell me something. My fingers traced the cold metal, and I felt the same strange pull I had felt when I first saw the Mustang in the barn, only sharper. More urgent, the air inside the building was heavy, unmoving, as if it had been sealed for decades. I opened the driver's side door, the hinges groaning in protest, and slid into the seat, the smell of stale leather and dust wrapping around me. The dashboard was coated in a fine layer of grime, but beneath it I could see a small brass plate engraved with the same name from the letters in the barn. I reached for the glove compartment, and it resisted at first before giving way. Inside was a single object wrapped in oil-stained cloth. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small pocket watch, its silver case tarnished, but intact. When I pressed the latch, it sprang open. The ticking inside faint, but steady on the inside cover was an inscription in the same hurried handwriting as the letters it read. "Time runs out faster on the wrong road." My pulse quickened as I turned the watch over in my hand. The ticking seemed to grow louder, filling the silence until it was all I could hear. A sudden noise from outside made me freeze. It was faint but distinct. The crunch of gravel under slow, deliberate footsteps. I killed the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness, and listened. The steps drew closer, stopping just outside the open door of the building. I could feel the presence of someone standing there waiting. The silence stretched until it felt like the air itself was pressing in on me. Then the footsteps began again, moving away, fading into the night. I waited until the sound was gone before stepping out into the cool air. The gravel lot was empty. The trees beyond still and dark, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I locked the building behind me, slipping the pocket watch into my jacket, and started the Mustang, the engine AS growl. Breaking the silence, the map lay on the seat beside me, the red X now feeling less like a destination and more like a warning. I pulled back onto the gravel road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The trees closing in once more, the ticking of the watch, faint in my pocket like a heartbeat, counting down to something I could not yet see but knew was coming. The road began to rise, the gravel giving way to cracked asphalt as the trees slowly thinned. The air felt sharper here, colder, as if I had climbed into a different season. The Mustang S headlights swept across jagged rocks and patches of tall grass, and then I saw it. A clearing ahead, bathed in the pale light of the moon. At its center stood the remains of what must have once been a large structure, now reduced to a skeletal frame of rusted beams and crumbling stone. The ground around it was uneven, littered with fragments of metal and glass that caught the light like scattered stars. I eased the Mustang to a stop, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The silence. Here was deeper than anywhere I had been on this journey. Not the quiet of an empty road, but the kind that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. I stepped out my boots, crunching on the debris, the map in my pocket suddenly heavier. The red X, no longer just a mark on paper, but a place under my feet. The skeletal frame loomed above me, its shadows stretching long and thin across the clearing. As I moved closer, I noticed something half buried in the dirt, a strip of leather worn and cracked. I pulled it free and found it was wrapped around a small metal box, the surface dented and scarred, the lock rusted but still intact. I tried the small square key I had found in the barn, and it turned with a reluctant click. Inside was a stack of photographs, each one more unsettling than the last. They showed the Mustang in different places on different nights, always parked in the shadows, always with the same man standing nearby his face, partly hidden by the brim of his hat, and in the background of every photo the same skeletal structure I was standing in now. The last photograph was different. It was taken in daylight, the Mustang parked exactly where I had left it tonight. But this time there was someone in the driver AS seat, and as I looked closer, my stomach tightened, because the face staring back through the windshield was mine. A sudden gust of wind tore through the clearing, scattering dust and leaves, the skeletal frame groaning as if it might collapse. I shoved the photographs back into the box and turned toward the Mustang, but the headlights flickered twice, and then went dark, the engine silent, the night pressing in around me heavier than before. And somewhere in the distance, just beyond the reach of the moonlight, I thought I heard it. The low, steady growl of another engine drawing closer. The sound of that other engine grew louder, steady, and deliberate, like it belonged to someone who was not in a hurry, because they already knew exactly where I was. The darkness beyond the clearing seemed to shift the skeletal frame, casting long, jagged shadows across the ground. I stood still, my eyes scanning the tree line. The photographs in the box still fresh in my mind, the image of my own face staring back at me from the driver's seat of the Mustang, burning into my thoughts. The growl of the engine came closer until I could feel it in the ground beneath my boots, a low vibration that seemed to sync with the faint ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket. Then the headlights appeared, cutting through the darkness, two narrow beams that swept across the clearing before locking onto me. The car emerged slowly from the trees, its shape unfamiliar at first, then clearer. A black coupe from the late 60s, its paint dull but intact, its chrome catching the moonlight in sharp flashes. It rolled to a stop a few yards away, the engine idling low, the driver hidden in shadow behind the glass. For a long moment, neither of us moved, the night holding us in a kind of suspended silence. The door of the black coupe opened with a slow creak, and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, his movements unhurried. He wore a dark coat, the collar turned up against the cold, his face partly hidden in shadow, but his eyes catching the light sharp and unblinking. He looked at me. then at the Mustang, then back at me again as if measuring something in his mind. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even carrying the weight of someone who had been waiting a long time. He said, "You found it, didn't it, you?" He took a slow step closer, the crunch of gravel under his boots sounding far too loud in the stillness, his eyes never leaving mine as if he was searching for something behind them, something I wasn't even sure I had. His presence felt heavy, like the air itself was bending around him. He glanced at the skeletal frame, then at the Mustang, and finally back to me and said, "You've gone further than most do, but you re-standing where the road starts to turn against you." His voice was calm, but there was a weight in it that made the hairs on my arms rise. He told me the man who once drove my car had stood in this exact spot on a night not unlike this one, and that when he left, he wasn't at the same. He said the photographs were not just records. They were warnings, and that the one with my face was not a trick of light or some coincidence. I asked him what it meant, but he only smiled faintly, like someone who had heard the same question too many times and never liked the answer. He said the red X was not a destination, but a point of no return, and that once you crossed it, the road ahead would not let you go until it had taken what it wanted. He stepped back toward his car, the black coupe ES engine still idling low, and told me if I wanted to turn back, this was the last place to do it. Then he paused his hand on the door and added, "But if you keep going, you'll find out why the car chose you." He slid into the driver's seat, and the coupe rolled backward into the shadows, the sound of its engine fading, until it was gone, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the skeletal beams. I stood there for a long moment, the photographs in my jacket feeling heavier than they should, the ticking of the pocket watch steady against my chest. I turned toward the Mustang, its dark shape waiting at the edge of the clearing like it knew what I would decide. I slid into the seat, started the engine, and felt the vibration travel through me. The headlights cut across the clearing and onto the narrow road beyond the X. The gravel crunched under the tires as I crossed the invisible line. The air seemed to shift colder, sharper, the trees ahead taller and darker than before, the road winding into a place that felt untouched. For decades, the map lay folded beside me, but I no longer needed it. The pull was stronger now, almost physical, guiding me deeper into the unknown and somewhere far ahead in the darkness. I thought I could hear it, the faint echo of another engine matching my pace, waiting for me to arrive. The road ahead seemed to pull me in tighter with every turn, the trees leaning over like they were closing ranks, the darkness between them thick and unbroken, the Mustang's headlights cutting a narrow path through it, the sound of that other engine still there somewhere behind me, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel like a shadow that refused to fall away. The air was colder now, sharp against my skin. Even through the glass, the ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket steady and unrelenting, like it was counting down to something I couldn't name. The asphalt gave way to dirt, the tires kicking up dust that hung in the beams of the headlights. The road narrowed until it felt less like a road and more like a trail carved by something that had passed through. Long ago, the trees thinned just enough for me to see a faint glow ahead, not the warm flicker of firelight, but a pale, steady light that seemed to hum in the air. I eased off the accelerator, letting the Mustang roll forward, the glow growing brighter until the trees opened into a clearing. At the center stood a structure unlike anything I had expected. A low circular building of stone, its surface mottled with moss and age, the pale light spilling from narrow slits in its walls. The ground around it was bare, as if nothing had grown there for years. I killed the engine, the sudden silence pressing in heavy, and stepped out the air. Here was different, stiller, colder, carrying a faint metallic tang that made the back of my throat tighten. I moved toward the building, each step slow, deliberate. The crunch of dirt under my boots, loud in the stillness. The narrow entrance was framed by heavy stones worn smooth by time. I stepped inside. The light was brighter here, but it had no source. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, casting everything in a cold, bluish hue. The air was thick with the smell of oil and something older. Something that made my skin prickle. In the center of the room sat a single object draped in a heavy canvas sheet. I crossed the floor, my footsteps echoing, and pulled the sheet away. Beneath it was an engine. Not just any engine, but one that looked almost identical to the Mustang. As only cleaner, untouched by rust or time. Its chrome gleaming in the strange light etched into the metal were the same 3 numbers from the emblem and the license plate, and beneath them a single word. The same word from the letters in the barn. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, the ticking of the pocket watch grew louder, filling the room until it was all I could hear. And in that sound, I realized it wasn't just ticking. It was matching the rhythm of another engine, somewhere outside, growing closer. The growl outside deepened until it was no longer just a sound, but a vibration in the floor beneath my boots. The strange light in the stone chamber seemed to pulse in time with it. The engine in front of me, gleaming under that cold glow, felt almost alive. The etched numbers and that single word staring back at me like a challenge. I stepped toward the doorway, the night beyond, darker than before, the pale moonlight barely touching the clearing, and then I saw them twin beams of light cutting through the trees. Slow, deliberate, unhurried, the black coupe rolling into view, its chrome catching the faint light like a blade. It stopped just short of the stone building. The engine idling low, the driver door opening with the same slow creak I had heard on the bridge. The man stepped out, his coat collar turned up, his eyes fixed on me with the same unblinking intensity as before. But now there was something else in them, recognition. Not of the car, not of the place, but of me. He walked forward, each step measured, until he stood just inside the ring of light spilling from the doorway. He glanced at the engine behind me, then back at the Mustang parked in the shadows, and said, "You've brought it full circle." I asked him what this place was and why the engine here was identical to mine. He said it wasn't identical. It was the same, that the Mustang I drove and the one that had been here were bound in a way that couldn't be explained by metal and fuel alone. He told me the man from the photographs had built something into the car, something that carried more than speed, something that remembered, and that once you woke it up, it would find its way back here no matter who was behind the wheel. The ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket grew louder until it was almost drowning out his voice. He stepped closer, lowering his tone, and said, "The watch was the key. Not to starting the car, but to starting what was inside it. He told me that once the watch stopped, the road ahead would change, and there would be no turning back." He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph, handing it to me. It was the same shot I had found in the box in the clearing, the Mustang parked under the skeletal frame. But this time, the figure in the driver's seat wasn't me, and it wasn't to the man from the old photos. It was him. Before I could speak, the sound of another engine roared from somewhere beyond the trees, louder, faster, closing in. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound, and he said it here earlier than I thought. Then he turned and walked back to the coupe, sliding into the driver's seat. Without another word, the headlights flared, and the car shot back into the darkness, leaving me standing in the doorway. The strange engine behind me, the Mustang waiting outside, and the sound of that third engine tearing through the night toward the clearing. The roar of the third engine grew louder until it was no longer just a sound, but a force pressing against my chest. The strange light from the stone chamber spilling out into the clearing seemed to shiver with each pulse of that sound. The Mustang sat in the shadows, its chrome catching faint glints of moonlight. The photographs in my jacket felt heavier with every heartbeat, the ticking of the pocket watch now so loud it was almost a vibration in my bones. I stepped out into the open, my eyes fixed on the tree line where the sound was coming from. And then it appeared, a shape emerging from the darkness, low, wide, and aggressive, its headlights cutting through the night like blades. It rolled into the clearing, slow, deliberate, the engine's growl deep and uneven, like it had been built for power, not comfort. The body was a dark metallic gray, the kind of color that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. The driver was hidden behind tinted glass. But I could feel their gaze locked on me. The car stopped just short of the stone building, the engine idling low, the silence between each rumble heavy with intent. The door opened, and a figure stepped out, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly what they are capable of. They were tall, lean, their jacket worn, but well kept, their boots silent on the dirt as they closed. The distance between us, their eyes sharp and unblinking, scanning me, the Mustang, and the strange engine behind me in a single sweep. When they spoke, their voice was calm, but carried an edge like a blade kept sharp for years. They said, "You have something that belongs to me?" I asked what that was, and they smiled faintly, not with amusement, but with certainty, and said, "The road you are on." I held my ground as the figure stepped closer. Their eyes locked on mine with a focus that felt like it could strip away every layer of thought I had, the pale light from the stone chamber behind me casting long shadows across their face. They stopped just short of arm's reach, their presence heavy in the cold night air, and repeated slowly, "You have something that belongs to me." This time, their tone carried no edge of threat, only certainty, like they were stating a fact that could not be argued. I asked them what they meant, and they tilted their heads slightly as if weighing how much to reveal. They said, "The car you drive is not just a machine, it is a vessel, and it remembers every road, every hand on the wheel, every choice made inside it." They told me the man from the photographs had not been its first driver, and I would not be its last, but I was the only one to bring it back here without being led by force. They glanced toward the Mustang, its dark shape waiting in the shadows, and then toward the strange engine inside the chamber and said, "Both are the same, and neither is whole without the other." The ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket grew louder again, and they noticed it, their eyes narrowing slightly. They said, "That watch is the heartbeat of the road you are on when it stops. The road will decide what to keep and what to let go." They stepped back slightly, their gaze never leaving mine, and told me there was one more thing I needed to see before the choice was made. They turned and began walking toward the tree line without looking back, their footsteps silent on the dirt. I hesitated, glancing at the Mustang, then at the engine behind me before following them into the darkness. The forest swallowed us quickly, the pale light from the clearing fading until only the faint glow of the moon filtered through the branches. The air was colder here, sharper, each breath visible in the dim light. We walked in silence for what felt like minutes or hours until the trees opened into another clearing smaller than the first. At its center sat a car half buried in the earth, its body twisted and broken as if it had been dropped from the sky. The paint was the same deep green as the Mustang, the same racing stripes now faded and torn, the same badge on the grill, only here it was cracked down the middle. They stepped aside, letting me approach the wreck. The air around it felt heavy, charged like the moment before a storm. I reached out and touched the cold metal, and in that instant the ticking of the watch stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, pressing in from every direction. And then somewhere far away I heard it, the low growl of the Mustang S engine starting on its own. The growl of the Mustang in the clearing was no longer steady. It was rising, like it was answering a call from something unseen. The figure beside the wrecked green car didn't move, their eyes fixed on me as if they were waiting to see what I would do. The trees beyond the clearing shuddered, though there was no wind, and then the third engine broke through the darkness, its roar sharper, faster, more aggressive than anything I had heard tonight. The sound bounced off the trunks and the stone walls until it felt like it was coming from every direction at once. The headlights burst into view, blinding for a moment, before they cut a hard arc across the clearing, a low black shape sliding into the open, its bodywork gleaming wet under the moonlight, like it had just come out of the rain. The driver door opened before the car had even stopped, and a figure stepped out, moving with the kind of precision that comes from knowing exactly how much space they own in a room, or in this case, a night. Their boots hit the dirt without a sound, their gaze sweeping over the wreck, the strange engine, the Mustang, and finally, locking on me. They walked forward slowly each step, deliberate, the air between us tightening with every pace until they stopped just short of the wrecked car. Their voice, when it came, was low, but carried easily in the stillness. They said, "You've been driving my road." I didn't answer because I could feel it wasn't a question. They tilted their head slightly, studying me like they were matching my face to something they had seen before. Then they glanced at the figure who had led me here, and something passed between them, silent but heavy, the kind of exchange that does not need words because the history is already written. The ticking of the pocket watch started again, faint at first, then louder, syncing with the idle of the Mustang. In the distance, the new arrival's eyes flicked toward the sound, and they smiled. But it wasn't a friendly, it was the kind of smile that says, "The game has already started, and you just now realizing you in it." They stepped closer, their voice dropping even lower, and said, "When the watch stops again, you'll have to choose which one you keep and which one you leave behind." I asked what they meant, but they were already turning back toward their car, the engine flaring as they slid behind the wheel. The black shape pulled away, disappearing into the trees as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the clearing heavy with the sound of the Mustang's idle and the faint ticking in my jacket. The figure beside the wreck finally spoke, their voice quiet but certain. They said, "You were running out of road, and when it ends, it won. Be where you think it will be." I looked back toward the Mustang, its headlights cutting through the edge of the clearing like a beacon, and I knew whatever choice was coming, it was closer than I wanted it to be. The sound of the Mustang's idle in the distance shifted from a steady growl to a sharp, impatient rumble, like it was no longer waiting for me, but calling me. The figure beside the wreck stepped back into the shadows without another word, their outline dissolving into the dark as if they had never been there at all. The ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket grew louder and faster, syncing perfectly with the rhythm of the Mustang's engine until it felt like both were inside my chest, beating in unison. I turned toward the sound and began to move my boots, crunching over the cold ground, each step pulling me closer to the edge of the clearing. The trees ahead seemed to part, just enough for the headlights to break through the beams cutting across my face before locking onto me. The Mustang sat there, idling, its chrome glinting under the moonlight, but there was no one in the driver's seat. The door hung open, slightly swaying as if it had just been pushed. The air around it was charged, the kind of static that prickles the skin and makes every instinct scream to move. I slid into the seat, the leather cold against my back, the smell of gasoline and damp earth, thick in the air the moment my hands touched the wheel. The ticking stopped. The silence that followed was broken by the sudden roar of another engine behind me, closer than it had ever been. Before the black coupe burst from the tree line, its headlights flaring as it swung onto the narrow trail ahead of me, the driver's silhouette just visible through the glare. Without thinking, I slammed the Mustang into gear, the tires spitting dirt as the car lunged forward, the chase snapping into place like it had been waiting for this moment all along. The coupe's taillights flared red as it took the first curve hard, the Mustang responding instantly, the engine's roar filling the night. The trail twisted through the forest, the trees flashing past in a blur, the headlights catching glimpses of old road signs bent and rusted the ground beneath us, shifting from dirt to cracked asphalt to gravel. The coupe stayed just ahead, never pulling too far away, never letting me close the air rushing through the open window, was cold sharp, carrying the scent of oil and something faintly metallic. The same scent that had followed me since the barn. Every turn, every straight stretch felt like it was pulling me deeper into a place that didn't exist on any map. The road, narrowing, the trees leaning in until it felt like they were watching. Somewhere ahead, the sound of rushing water began to rise beneath the engines. The road dipped and curved, and then the trees broke open to reveal a bridge, old and skeletal. Its beams rusted, its boards slick with mist. The coupe hit it first, the sound of its tires on the wood echoing into the night. I followed the Mustang S weight, making the boards groan, the river below black, and slow the headlights catching the faint shimmer of the current halfway across the coupe. S brake lights flared and it skidded sideways, blocking the path. The driver's S door opened and the figure stepped out their shadow, stretching long across the boards, as the Mustang rolled to a stop inches away, the night holding its breath for what would happen next. The figure stood in the middle of the bridge, their shadow stretching long across the slick boards, the black coupe idling behind them, its headlights cutting sharp lines through the mist. The Mustang S engine rumbled under my hands like it was ready to leap forward, but something in the stillness held me in place. The pocket watch in my jacket began to tick again. Slow, deliberate, each beat echoing in my chest, the figure stepped closer. Their boots heavy on the wood, their eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. They said, "You've come further than anyone else, but this is where the road decides." I asked them what that meant, but they only tilted their heads slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear. The ticking grew louder, the boards beneath us vibrating with the sound of both engines, the river below moving slow and dark, like it was waiting for something. They told me the car had brought me here because it remembered, and that memory was not mine to keep unless I was willing to give something back. They glanced toward the skeletal frame of the bridge, then back at me and said, "The choice is simple, but the cost is not." Before I could speak, the roar of a third engine cut through the night, sharper, faster than before. The headlights burst from the far end of the bridge, blinding for a moment. Before locking onto us, the figure stepped aside, the black coupe S driver door swinging open as the new arrival closed the distance. The air between the three of us charged like the moment before a storm. The Mustang S engine growled low, the pocket watch ticking faster until it was almost a hum in my ears. The new car slid to a stop, its tires hissing on the wet boards, the driver stepping out with a slow, deliberate motion, their gaze sweeping over me. The Mustang and the figure beside the coupe before settling on the pocket watch in my jacket. The new driver's gaze locked on the pocket watch in my jacket, and for a moment it felt like the ticking was the only sound left in the world. The black coupe S driver stood motionless beside their car, their eyes shifting between me and the newcomer as if they too were waiting for something unseen to happen. The air on the bridge was heavy, the mist curling around our legs, the boards beneath us groaning softly under the weight of 3 cars and 3 people who all seemed to know more than they were saying. The newcomer stepped closer, their boots silent on the wet wood. Their voice low but carrying easily in the stillness, they said, "The watch is almost done, and when it stops, the road will take what it owed." They glanced at the Mustang, then at the strange engine still visible in the stone chamber beyond the clearing, as if they could see through the trees and the dark. They told me the car had been built to carry more than a driver. It carried a choice, and that choice had been passed from one set of hands to another for decades, each time the road deciding who was worthy to keep going and who would be left behind. The ticking grew faster, sharper, until it was almost a continuous hum in my ears. The black coupe S driver shifted their stance, their hand brushing the roof of their car, like they were ready to move at any second. The newcomer S eyes never left mine, as they said, "You can only drive one out of here, and whichever you leave will never be found again." The words hit harder than I expected because I knew they weren't talking about just the cars. They were talking about the road itself, the history, the weight of everything that had led me here. The last tick was louder than the rest, and then there was silence. The kind of silence that feels like the world has stopped breathing. The newcomer stepped back toward their car, the black coupe IS driver. Did the same, both engines roaring to life in perfect unison, the sound filling the bridge and the night beyond. I looked at the Mustang, its headlights cutting through the mist, the wheel waiting under my hands, and I knew the road was about to move whether I was ready or not. I slid into the seat, the leather cold, the smell of gasoline and rain thick in the air. My fingers tightened. On the wheel, the other 2 cars already rolling forward into the darkness ahead. The bridge trembling under the weight of all 3 engines. I pressed the accelerator. the Mustang surging forward, the mist tearing away as the road opened into a stretch I had never seen before, the trees leaning back, the sky wide and black above, and somewhere deep in the roar of the engine, I thought I heard it a voice. Not mine, not anyone else. It's just the road itself, whispering that this was the last run and there would be no turning back.